Okay, here is our May 22nd, 2021 presentation, Creating a Nonprofit and Critical Thinking Through Ethics. And most of you know me, Dave Glickman, and I'm currently the ethics officer and I work in quality consultant. And now I have 6 months until retiring, but who's counting? Um, and my hobby now is creating and nurturing PEP, mountain biking and woodworking. And I would say I'm middle left leaning at about a 3.5 on a scale of 1 to 10, left being towards the 1, right being towards the 10. And I have to say my political pain has increased a little bit lately because of some of the things going on with debasing or not going forward, or Republicans not wishing to go forward on the investigations related to the insurrection. How about if you go next, Steve?
Yeah, Steve Glickman. I'm probably, I guess, a 3. I'd say, 6.5 or 7. I'm not watching news much, so that's good. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Joel?
Okay, Joel Worasnik. Let's see. I worked, as far as background goes, I worked some of the years with Dave, but I worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs for almost 40 years. The last 20 in information technology. Bias disclosure, I'm going to call it a 3. That's been pretty steady most of my life, I guess. Political pain. Yeah, I kind of, Dave and I were talking about this morning. This whole thing about being in denial of the January 6th is giving me some heartburn. And so I'm going to call it a 6 or a 7. Favorite hobbies. Well, right now I drive a school bus for Issaquah. That's my hobby. And mountain biking. And all kinds of indoor and outdoor projects going on all the time, which COVID was actually a great asset for doing those kind of things.
Great. Thanks, Joel.
Yep.
Claudia, and I see Laura's joined us, so we'll have Laura go after Claudia.
I'm Claudia Rausch. I'm a management analyst at HHS. I work in policy. I used to work at the VA for about 5 years. 2 years of those 5 were in Seattle, Washington, as a director of credentialing and privileging. Let's see. I would say my bias disclosure statement, I'm pretty left-leaning, probably like a 2. And political pain, moral distress, I would say right now is civil rights and corruption in government. Favorite pandemic hobbies, gosh, I've been doing a lot of study, decorating, stuff like that. Yeah, that's me.
Cool. Thanks, Claudia. Laura, want to introduce yourself to the group, please?
Sure. I'm Laura Burns. Okay, so current former occupation. Currently unemployed / trying to make a documentary, which is a little off-brand. I worked in the government, HHS, for about 9 years in policy, health policy. And then I worked with the Lincoln Project. After that, moved to Albania, where I'm currently. Worked with the Prime Minister on his campaign here. And since then, I have just been actually doing my favorite pandemic hobbies, which are hiking, a little bit of climbing, exploring. Just got in my car this morning and drove down to the southern part of Albania, and I'm on the beach right now. I mean, not right now, but here. Bias disclosure, I'm pretty progressive, 1 to 2. Political pain, moral distress. I feel real concerned about the ease in which the especially conservatives are not willing to address what happened on January 6th. And concerned about Trumpism and how it still has a handle on the Republican Party. So yeah, I don't know what my rating is, but I'm not super optimistic. I'll also say I'm not super happy with the US and how they're handling the crisis in Israel and Palestine right now, but it is exactly what we should have expected, so.
All right. Thanks for sharing, Laura. Okay, so one of the concepts behind PEP is as a means for reducing moral distress. So just in being here with each other, we get a chance to focus on positive and wisdom via the field of ethics. Ethics as a means for critical thinking. It will hopefully provide peace in the eye of the storm. It's a mechanism for personal understanding and growth, a means for reducing moral distress around politics, establishing a sense of community belonging and shared values and goals, and sharing your understanding and growth with others. By the way, I forgot to introduce Steve. Steve, did you introduce yourself?
I did. I didn't do a very
Okay.
good job. That's probably why you forgot.
Oh, sorry.
I forgot to say I'm a decision analyst at Boeing, and so I use a systematic process to help make decisions. That's what I do. Yeah.
And what was your moral distress level? I can't remember if you mentioned.
7.
Okay, you're pretty high. Okay, all right. Hopefully this will be a means for reducing your moral distress. So, as a means for making a difference in our current political environment, bioethics. I use this in ethics consultation, and I'm basically using a transferable skill from what we currently use in bioethics by developing alternative ethics-based solutions, thought and conversation about understanding core beliefs, moving towards ethics-based aspirational goals, and doing something rather than letting everything happen to us. The concept that we're trying to go for is to expand towards the right and towards the left by starting off in the center. And the inclinations are for people to go, well, what about these people on the far right? And what about these people on the far left? I think it's more important to focus in on expanding the middle, where we will be able to pull in more people from the right, we'll be able to pull in more people from the left, and hopefully reach a happier medium than what we currently have now. So I've used this analogy before. This is a iceberg and storm weather analogy. Stormy conversations are typically above the water. It involves heated rhetoric and generalizations. They're frequently designed to incite and anger others towards violence even. Including the stolen election concept, left-wing radicals, right-wing radicals, and right-wing insurrectionists. And Antifa has been an interesting concept because I never found that objectionable until it was put within a certain context. And that is now becoming a means for inciting anger. What's below the surface? These are things that are harder to see, the core values, overt and hidden emotions. The waters can be choppy, but the deeper you go, the calmer it gets. And it's designed to bring conversations back to a universal concept such as the Constitution. It's the other alternative. Ethics-based discussions, characteristics include a new language for some. It's a new perspective for some. It graciously allows people an opportunity for repositioning. It can diffuse highly charged rhetoric. It fosters critical thinking, and it does focus on the positive. And what it's intended to do is to avoid the fighting that we get into the mud and avoiding the heated rhetoric. And here are some examples of applied ethics categories based in ethics domains. We did this in the 424 presentation on ranked choice voting with the ethical concept of the greatest good for the greatest number of people, which is beneficence. And subcomponents within that included transparency, truthfulness, conflict of interest, accurate and fact-based information, information reaches or does not reach the voters, information availability, and doing no harm. The other two ethics domains that we touched upon was within the duty of the public and the politicians. So we touched upon justice and fairness, the responsibility to vote, the responsibility of being an informed voter, the responsibility to enable fair and equal access to election. And then the other category or domain is virtue ethics, which is developing ethical character and practical wisdom to choose the right thing to do in complex situations. Some of our accomplishments include the following. We've had 7 presentations, we have 5 work groups, we have 5 proposed product lines. We're using this as an opportunity for our own learning and exploring. I'm having fun doing this, and I hope other people have fun doing it. We have a PEP Facebook web page or Facebook page, and we have a PEP website. And the 7 previous presentations and discussions included the general one that we did in the introductory meeting on 12/6/20. We had the MLK Ethics Forum, where we talked about post-insurrection, where do we go from here? We had the President's Day Forum, an ethics question on misinformation or disinformation. We did the candidate scoring and ranked choice voting on 2/27. We had the voting ethics workshop on 3/13/21, and that was off of the manuscript. That's in our area of focus. We had Braver Angels discussion, candidate scoring discussion, and voting ethics on 4/12. And then we did the combined presentation with voting ethics and ranked choice voting with PEP and Fair Vote Washington. So here are the 5 different work groups that we already have established. And of course, these are all existing, all volunteer work groups. The ethics work group, which is Robin Cook and myself, and Robin is a former ethicist that I used to work with. She's also retired, but on vacation in Hawaii and can't make it on Saturdays either. Our strategic planning work group, which consists of Steve as the lead, myself, Claudia, and Laura. And what's new is the one that our business planning work group, which is going to be Joel and myself. And I'm hoping to invite Katie to that. Katie was the attorney that's been present in previous groups, but she also took on a new full-time job as an attorney, even though she was retired for like 6-7 years. The candidate scorecard work group, which is Kara and Catherine. And then the website work group, which is Joel's son, Evan, and myself. So here are some of the product lines that we've been discussing and been developing. So ethics analysis, by doing critical analysis of issues, we have presentation publications. This is something that I wish to develop, which is ethics consultation to politicians and candidates. I hope to have that up and running before the 2022 election. And there's a lot of candidates, I didn't realize this until I did some research, that have ethicists as hired employees. But we would be able to do this as a subcontracted service, of course, and might provide greater comfort level to them. Other things that we're looking at doing is partnerships and developing ethics-based endorsements. So I'm going to have a web page that is going to talk about ranked choice voting and how we think it's an ethically appropriate means for voting. And then we're going to relay people to Fair Vote Washington and then the National Fair Vote US or .org is a means for learning more about ranked choice voting. Braver Angels, we've had some of our colleagues participate in Braver Angels through political discussions and debates. Anti-corruption, I've been looking and researching the organization called represent.us. And so we have the means for developing alliances and having them co-present and then being able to endorse certain components of what they stand for. And then voter guidance. So there's people been working on the candidate scoring, a reliable source for candidate voting information. And I'm hoping Steve would be willing to develop this decision analysis via town halls or Zoom meetings on certain political hot topics, such as gun control, immigration, voting rights and suppression, and so on. I think a town hall would lend itself really well to that, and especially if we ended up combining efforts with Braver Angels, and then they would be able to learn techniques related to decision analysis. So here's our web page, and I pulled some of the analytics off of it. On 520, we've had 146 pages visited, which isn't a tremendous amount, 81 unique visits, and the average pages per unique visit is 2. But I still consider the web page, the website in its infancy under development. The other area that we have some notability is in, or a way of collecting information is on our Facebook page, and this is the Facebook page that we established. We only have 10 members, and Laura, you're welcome to join that if you're on Facebook. And what I do is I deposit different types of information into this that I think is intriguing, and one of the items that I recently deposited in there is a video that I'll share later in this presentation. And so in some ways it's like a draft page, which is why we're keeping it as a private group and a closed group. It's a draft page for what we could then put on our website and have discussion about it as well. So the cartoon, we're not a nonprofit corporation, is not by design, it just turned out that way. Well, by design, it looks like it's time for PEP to become a nonprofit. Donated time has its limitations. There appears to be a high level of interest in an ethics-based approach towards political reconciliation. And a formal nonprofit will only enhance our experience in organizational growth. And we don't have to always depend on everybody like ourselves to volunteer to step up to the plate and do stuff, particularly when we're working or have competing priorities. So in this PEP proposed business plan, we've already gotten into some of these items. So what's in process is conducting a needs assessment, and we've looked at some other organizations that do this, and we did this in our strategic planning meeting the other day. Completing a market analysis, that is establishing a plan for getting volunteer and financial support. And I think Laura mentioned the concept of getting, or maybe Claudia, the concept of getting grants for even the seed money for purposes of developing the organization to become a nonprofit. There's some costs involved in it, and it's not tremendous, but there are costs involved in that. Determining what services PEP provides, establishing our product lines and product services. What still needs to be accomplished is the parts that I'll want to work on with Joel, which is starting a nonprofit business entity, determining by the state that we're in, which is Washington State at this point. I think you'd actually start a nonprofit in other states, like Delaware is noted for easier rules and regulations to comply with, and so on. Looking into research grants, loans, and seed money. And by the way, I've had a number of people that wanted to donate, but we can't accept their money until we become a formal nonprofit. So anyways, establishing a plan for getting volunteer and financial support. Applying for tax exempt status, which takes about 6 months or longer. A plan for getting volunteer and financial support. Determine the type of nonprofits. So there's different types of nonprofits. and we have to figure out which one we are going to be. So this critical thinking, I found this on Facebook, and I saved it to our Facebook webpage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the slideshow temporarily and go to, I have it pulled up and do the presentation. So let's watch this presentation and I'll show you why.
Every day, a sea of decisions stretches before us. Some are small and unimportant, but others have a larger impact on our lives. For example, which politician should I vote for? Should I try the latest diet craze? Or will email make me a millionaire? We're bombarded with so many decisions that it's impossible to make a perfect choice every time. But there are many ways to improve our chances, and one particularly effective technique is critical thinking. This is a way of approaching a question that allows us to carefully deconstruct a situation, reveal its hidden issues, such as bias and manipulation, and make the best decision. If the critical part sounds negative, that's because, in a way, it is. Rather than choosing an answer because it feels right, a person who uses critical thinking subjects all available options to scrutiny and skepticism. Using the tools at their disposal, they'll eliminate everything but the most useful and reliable information. There are many different ways of approaching critical thinking, but here's one 5-step process that may help you solve any number of problems. 1. Formulate your question. In other words, know what you're looking for. This isn't always as straightforward as it sounds. For example, if you're deciding whether to try out the newest diet craze, your reasons for doing so may be obscured by other factors, like claims that you'll see results in just 2 weeks. But if you approach the situation with a clear view of what you're actually trying to accomplish by dieting, whether that's weight loss, better nutrition, or having more energy, that'll equip you to sift through this information critically, find what you're looking for, and decide whether the new fad really suits your needs. 2. Gather your information. There's lots of it out there, so having a clear idea of your question will help you determine what's relevant. If you're trying to decide on a diet to improve your nutrition, you may ask an expert for their advice or seek other people's testimonies. Information gathering helps you weigh different options, moving you closer to a decision that meets your goal. 3. Apply the information, something you do by asking critical questions. Facing a decision, ask yourself, what concepts are at work? What assumptions exist? Is my interpretation of the information logically sound? For example, in an email that promises you millions, you should consider, what is shaping my approach to this situation? Do I assume the sender is telling the truth? Based on the evidence, is it logical to assume I'll win any money? 4. Consider the implications. Imagine it's election time, and you've selected a political candidate based on their promise to make it cheaper for drivers to fill up on gas. At first glance, that seems great. But what about the long-term environmental effects? If gasoline use is less restricted by cost, this could also cause a huge surge in air pollution, an unintended consequence that's important to think about. 5. Explore other points of view. Ask yourself why so many people are drawn to the policies of the opposing political candidate. Even if you disagree with everything that candidate says, exploring the full spectrum of viewpoints might explain why some policies that don't seem valid to you appeal to others. This will allow you to explore alternatives, evaluate your own choices, and ultimately help you make more informed decisions. This 5-step process is just one tool, and it certainly won't eradicate difficult decisions from our lives, but it can help us increase the number of positive choices we make. Critical thinking can give us the tools to sift through a sea of information and find what we're looking for. And if enough of us use it, it has the power to make the world a more reasonable place.
Okay, any thoughts or comments about that video?
Yeah, I'll just say decision analysis uses a lot of that sort of thing. Decision analysis is, I call it critical, sometimes I'll call it critical thinking for decision making. You know, um, one thing that they didn't talk much about, at least I must say I was dozing off just, I apologize, but we frame the problem. And so that's like asking the question. Then we identify alternatives, then we gather information to evaluate the alternatives, taking into account what our values are. And then we choose the alternative that gives us the best alternative. And we take into account uncertainty, which is really important in a lot of decision-making situations.
Good point, Steve. I think that, you know, what happens is that when I watch these things, I learn and can enhance um, our approach. Um, so, uh, so these are the 5 steps that were, let me swap this. These were the 5 steps that were presented in the video. And in bioethics, we use something very similar, but I added to it, consider number 4, consider the various perspective or other points of view, which we sort of do informally in ethics, but I like having more concrete steps in this process. So from that, you know, I'm trying to create a hybrid of how we use ethics and politics, and I thought that it was very similar. So in ethics, we construct an ethics question. We identify the competing values. We discuss and analyze elements related to the competing values. We determine the applied ethics principles or domains, considering various perspectives or points of view, and developing an action plan to support an ethics position. And an action plan could be a wide variety of things. It includes writing to your congressman. It could include supporting certain candidates and so on. I mean, the list can go on forever. So what are the next steps? So I'm proposing that we continue our efforts within our smaller work groups. I want to develop an ethics training curriculum. I also want to develop an ethics consultation product. And given those scenarios, I was thinking of a summer sabbatical for the larger group presentations, and then maybe reconvening in the fall, and also considering alternate days and times. You know, this is sort of like in the middle of a Saturday where people may be planning to do something. I know some people that are out on a boat, and there are some people that are attending a conference, and there are some people that are out of town. So we may want to consider alternate days and times, and then reconvening in the larger group in the fall of 2021, where we'll have more items developed. So any thoughts on that approach? And this is just a reminder of our web page, and then I'm going to stop the share. Okay. So any feedback or thoughts that where we want to go with this is, and I think this gives a pretty good overview of where we're at and where we're going.
So Dave, you're thinking the smaller groups would continue to work on their various projects, but the larger group would not come together till the fall.
Correct.
Okay. Sounds pretty good.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Also, just a little, it's very time consuming producing these things, you know, and it's very difficult with competing priorities trying to do. I was doing 2 a month for a while, and I'm getting a little burned out on doing them, although I love them, and I find it actually very therapeutic. I found it just really insightful in terms of what I can develop and how creative you can be, and pulling in videos, and I just find it a very creative process, and it's something that I think I'm going to love doing as I move into retirement. And we have, you know, already pre-established get-togethers. You know, like we finally came upon a meeting time for our strategic planning group. I have a meeting with Evan every Thursday on the web page, and we only meet for 15 minutes each week, and he makes corrections. and enhances it. I meet with Robin Cook. I was meeting with her every week, but she's now down in Hawaii on her vacation, her 30-day vacation, and she's retired.
Sounds
Um,
tough.
yeah, sounds tough. And so, so those are the 5. And then Joel and I can get together maybe once every other week. Maybe we can do it while we're mountain biking, as we were talking this morning. So
I only work with beer. I don't work with mountain bikes.
okay. So, but Joel has some experience in that he is on. You're on the board for
Friends of
Fisher
Fisher
House.
House,
Friends of
Puget
Fisher
Sound.
House, right? Right. And what's really interesting, Joel was asking me whether I'm familiar with bylaws, and I don't know if you remember this, Claudia, but I had to write a section of the bylaws related to ethics, and I thought it was when you were there.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I think that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
For
So
a set of rules or bylaws eventually. Yeah.
yeah. So I have some experience in writing components to the bylaws. So I know the general overall purpose and so on. And Joel has the other parts of the expertise. But if we get or apply for and get a grant, or we get promised seed money, we can hire some people to do this stuff, which would really make this organization take off, I think. But we did do a brief environmental scan of a few organizations. It's impossible to do a wide scale without devoting enormous amounts of time. But I haven't even seen anything close to what we're looking to do in other organizations. I mean, you can see some parallels, but I think we have a very unique product. So
I do have one question. Is there just because it's easier to form, I don't really know much about this other than it's difficult to form a nonprofit. Is there a reason to not do a PAC?
well, we can do a PAC, but you have to have if you're going to take in donations, you have to have a nonprofit to do that. So, and what we originally talked about was a PAC and a super PAC, which would be able to invite funds into it. But again, you have to have this nonprofit global entity pre-established for doing that.
Oh, I did not realize that. Okay.
Yeah. So, and it seems strange, but and I remember Stephen Colbert doing a super PAC, and I don't know if he established. There may be some ways of doing super PACs that circumvent that, but I haven't found those venues for doing that. But I can do. We can do more research, and we could also convene with just this smaller group on a Saturday as well. To talk about some of that stuff, because right now we have the business group, which is Joel and myself, and the strategic planning group, which is the 4 of us. So anyways, let me do some more research on it, and maybe I'll present something, and we could just have a business group and a strategic planning group meeting, if that sounds good. All right. Other comments and thoughts? Okay. Well, thanks everybody for your time. I'm glad that you were able to come, and I think we have a decent recording established that I'll be able to post to the website. All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, David.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Right.
Bye-bye.